The wall clock showed 3:30 in the afternoon when Isabelle closed the laptop and sighed, rubbing her tired eyes with her hands. The light entering through the wide apartment windows had that shade that only autumn knows how to give, illuminating the beige sofa and making the leaves of the plants scattered around the corners of the room glisten. She loved that hour, when the sun was still present but less aggressive, inviting a break. Isabelle Martinez was known among her colleagues for her ability to work for hours on end without complaining. Tall, with her brown hair always tied up in a messy bun, and attentive eyes that seemed to understand the world before it even explained itself, she carried an almost unshakable serenity. She had learned from an early age that life was made up more of waiting than of arrivals. At 34, she was one of the most respected interpreters at the international agency where she worked. She mastered 5 languages with impeccable fluency, transitioning between them as if changing shoes, naturally and without hesitation. It was at that same agency that she had met Renan 7 years ago during a training for new hires. Renan Silva, her husband of 5 years, was the perfect definition of compliment. While Isabelle was methodical and analytical, he was spontaneous and intuitive, a man of medium height, with broad shoulders, and a smile that seemed to light up any room. His specialty was Asian languages, while Isabelle mastered the European ones. Together they formed an incredible partnership, both in personal and professional life. Resting or giving up? Renan's deep and good-humoured voice filled the room as he entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. The scent of cinnamon and apple immediately spread. "Just reorganizing my thoughts," Isabelle replied, accepting the cup with a smile. "I finished translating those documents for tomorrow's conference." Renan sat down next to her, allowing their shoulders to lightly touch. It was one of those small gestures that built the intimacy between them, the kind of connection that didn't need words to exist. 2 years ago, they had accepted a transfer to a distant country, far from their families in the country where they were born. The adaptation had not been easy. A new language on the streets, new customs, even a new rhythm of life. But together, they had turned that place into a home. And more importantly, they had found a new family in the friends they made, other expatriates, co-workers, neighbours. People who, like them, understood what it meant to rebuild roots. Among all these new friends there was a special person, Clare Thompson, a 33-year-old young woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and a sharp sense of humour. Clare worked in the international relations department of a large company and had become Isabelle's best friend almost instantly. One of those friendships that seem predestined, as if at some point in the universe, something already knew they would need each other. "Did you talk to Clare today?" Renan asked, running his hand through his dark hair, a gesture that Isabelle had already learned to recognize as a sign of concern. The silence that followed was more eloquent than any response. It had been 6 months since Isabelle and Clare last spoke. 6 months of absence that weighed more than any presence. "No," Isabelle finally answered, taking a sip of tea to disguise the lump in her throat. Renan just nodded, respecting that space he knew he shouldn't invade. He knew his wife well, knew that behind that apparent calm there was a volcano of emotions that she rarely let overflow. What few knew, only Renan, Clare and the doctors, was that Isabelle had been fighting polycystic ovary syndrome and endometriosis for years, conditions that, besides frequent physical pain, brought an even greater emotional pain, the uncertainty about being able to have a child. Being a mother was not a whim for Isabelle. It was a desire so profound that sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night with the physical sensation of emptiness, as if her body knew exactly what was missing. It wasn't just about having a child, it was about continuing, about passing on all the love she carried inside her. Clare understood this desire like no one else. She also faced difficulties in getting pregnant, hormonal issues that doctors called infertility of unknown cause. An explanation that explained nothing, merely naming the absence of answers. Together, they had shared tears after negative tests, researched treatments, and discussed alternatives. When it came to motherhood, there were no secrets between them. Clare could describe the exact expression Isabelle made when seeing a baby cradled in someone's arms. Isabelle knew Clare's menstrual cycle phases by heart, anticipating when her friend would need comfort. It was that kind of friendship, rare, deep, almost an extension of oneself. Or it was. The last time they had talked, 6 months ago, everything changed. An apparently simple argument about politics over dinner at the house of mutual friends. Isabelle and Clare, both passionate, intense, and firm in their beliefs, had momentarily forgotten that what united them was greater than their differences. "You don't understand the real implications of this," Clare had said, her voice louder than usual. "I understand perfectly. The problem is that you are only seeing one side of the issue," Isabelle retorted, feeling her face flush. Harsh words were exchanged, nothing offensive in the traditional sense, no insults, no direct offense. But there was something worse than that, the sudden distance, the chasm that opened between two people who, until then, had shared everything. None of them called afterward. No message to apologize. Pride, that silent saboteur of relationships, had settled between them. Time continued to pass. Isabelle saw Clare's posts on social media, smiles with other people, moments that used to be shared with her. It hurt. More than she admitted, even to Renan. On a Thursday morning, while having coffee before heading to work, Isabelle was scrolling distractedly through her social media feed on her phone when she stopped at a photo that made her heart race. Clare, with one hand on her slightly rounded belly, tear-filled eyes, and a smile of someone who just discovered a treasure. The caption was short but said it all. After everything, he came. Life won. Isabelle closed her phone slowly, placing it on the table as if it was something fragile. She rested her forehead on the cold surface of the table and remained motionless. She couldn't cry. It wasn't envy she felt, nor resentment. It was a piercing longing, the absolute certainty that this was a moment that, in another scenario, would have been shared with her first. Clare was pregnant. The miracle they had sought for so long had arrived, but now they were distant, due to unspoken words and pride not swallowed. The days that followed were strange. Isabelle worked, smiled when necessary, kept up appearances. But Renan noticed how distant she was, how her eyes would fix on empty spots in the house for long minutes, how she seemed to carry an invisible weight. Then, on a Saturday afternoon, while Renan went out for a run, Isabelle felt a sudden nausea. It wasn't the first time that week. For a moment, her heart raced with a possibility that she almost didn't allow herself to consider. With trembling hands, she found a pregnancy test she had stored at the back of the bathroom cabinet, one of those hopeful purchases we always make, even when experience teaches us to expect the worst. The waiting minutes felt eternal. When the 2 pink lines clearly appeared on the display, Isabelle slid down to the floor, leaning her back against the bathtub. She held the test as if it were made of crystal. She couldn't believe it. After so much pain, so many attempts, so many no's from her own body, there was a yes. She was pregnant. When Renan returned and found her sitting on the living room floor still holding the test, he understood immediately. He knelt beside her, looked at the result, and without saying a word, hugged her so tightly that Isabelle felt as if she could finally breathe after years of being submerged. They cried together. They laughed through the tears. They stayed silent, just savouring the moment. They prayed, giving thanks for that unexpected miracle. In the days that followed, as the reality of the pregnancy settled in, Isabelle realised that the thought of Clare returned with even greater force. It was as if every new sensation, every change in her body, was accompanied by the automatic reflex of wanting to share it with her friend. "I wish I could tell Clare," she confessed to Renan one night over dinner. "She would laugh at my reaction. She would know exactly what I'm feeling." Renan merely looked at her with a mix of tenderness and concern, without commenting. Something in that confession stayed within him, like a seed. 2 weeks later, they decided to organize a simple dinner to announce the pregnancy to their closest friends. Isabelle prepared a guest list, checked dietary restrictions, and planned a simple yet elegant menu. Clare's name was not on the list, an absence that hurt, but one Isabelle did not allow herself to question. On the afternoon of the dinner, while Isabelle was finishing the preparations, Renan announced that he needed to go out quickly to buy something they had forgotten. "Don't take long," she asked. "The guests arrive in an hour." He kissed her forehead and promised to be quick. There was something different in his gaze and a determination mixed with nervousness that Isabelle couldn't decipher at the moment. 30 minutes later, while Isabelle was setting the dining table, she heard the door open. "That was quick," she commented, heading toward the entrance still with the apron tied around her waist. And then she froze. Renan was there, yes, but he was not alone. Beside him, with a light coat over a navy blue dress that highlighted an already visible pregnancy belly, was a woman, Clare. Her eyes were teary, and there was an evident nervousness in the way she held the strap of her bag, as if she were back on the first day of school, unsure about being welcome. The silence seemed elastic, stretching between the three people at the entrance. It was Renan who finally broke it, with a serene yet determined smile. "I know you two are too proud to give in, but I heard from Isabelle and from Clare's husband how much you miss each other. I just shortened the path. You don't need to waste more time." Isabelle felt her eyes sting. Clare was the first to sob, a hand covering her mouth as tears freely ran down her face. "I didn't know you," Clare began, looking at Isabelle's still imperceptible belly. "Renan just told me that you needed to talk to me before the other guests." Isabelle took a step forward, then another, until she was in front of Clare. There was so much to say that words seemed insufficient, inadequate. "I'm sorry for everything," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "Me too," Clare replied, and suddenly they were hugging, as if the 6 months of silence had never existed. Renan quietly stepped back, watching the moment with teary eyes and a satisfied smile. That night, while the other guests celebrated the news of Isabelle's pregnancy, she and Clare sat in the corner of the room, creating a private universe where only they existed, their stories, and the two new lives growing within them. They laughed at the coincidences, shared symptoms and fears, and confessed the names they had chosen for their babies. It was as if time, so relentless in other circumstances, had been kind to them, preserving that special connection intact. At one point, both of their husbands approached with glasses of juice, toasting with knowing smiles that seemed to say, this was it. This was all that was missing. Later, when everyone had left and only Clare and her husband remained, the two friends hugged at the door, a long farewell carrying the silent promise never to let pride separate them again. "Our children will grow up like siblings," Clare said, stroking her belly. "As it should be." Isabelle nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. After Clare left, Isabelle found Renan in the kitchen, putting away the last dishes. She hugged him from behind, resting her face against his back. "Thank you," she whispered, "for knowing what I needed before I even admitted it." He turned, holding her face between his hands. "Some relationships are too valuable to be lost to pride. You both deserve to experience this together, just as you've always dreamed." That night, lying in bed while watching the moonlight through the window, Isabelle reflected on how life had its own paths, how sometimes the greatest miracles come together, the long-desired pregnancy and the recovery of a friendship that seemed lost. She placed her hand on her belly, imagining the life growing inside. A life that would now be welcomed not only with love, but with an entire community around her, including her mother's best friend, and the child who would be born almost at the same time. Life, with all its quirks and twists, had given a new chance. And Isabelle was determined not to waste it, because some connections are too rare to be broken by fleeting differences. Some friendships are too deep to be forgotten. Some bonds, even when temporarily stretched by distance and pride, never really break. And in the silence of that night, two women in different houses, with protective hands over their bellies, shared the same silent gratitude for having found their way back to each other, just in time to experience together the greatest miracle of their lives. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.